Welcome to the Blue Collar Gold Podcast, the podcast that shows you how to build a world-class service business from the dirt up. And now, your host, Mark Stoner.
Hello and welcome back to the Blue Collar Gold Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Stoner. And forgive me for my absence for the last couple of weeks. I had a bad situation happen overseas. I mean, it's not horrible. It's kind of bad, but I was lucky enough to get to travel for our chimney industry for the U.S. And I was one of the U.S. delegates for a convention called ESHFO, European Chimney Sweeper Federation over there, and it's all the European countries, or most of them, and the U.S. is a guest over there. And so I was actually going to teach a class for this about, the chimney industry in the U.S. Well, I get over there and I get on a train, and I flew into Copenhagen. I had to take a short train ride over to Sweden. I get on the train, I fall asleep, I'm jet lagged. I have a main suitcase, a garment bag, and a backpack. And I fell asleep on the train. I then overslept my stop. I needed to get off in Sweden, but just by one stop. So when I woke up, I realized I just missed the stop. I waited for the next stop, and I was just going to grab a taxi and go back to where I needed to go and get off the next stop. So I was a little bit panicked and shaken up. I jumped off the train with my stuff, or I thought I had all my stuff. I started walking. I realized I did not have my garment bag with my suits and shoes and all my podcasting stuff. I turn around, I start walking back, and the doors close, and the train takes off. And you can't do anything about it. It's gone. I tried to call Lost and Found. I did it for days. I filed a police report. I lost all my suits and my podcasting stuff. So I couldn't really podcast from over there. So I'm sorry I've missed a couple weeks. Whole thing started off rough, but it was a fantastic trip. We got to work with a lot of other chimney companies across the world and know what they do good, what they need help with, and we just trade a lot of information. It was the technical meeting. One year it'll be the political meeting, and next year it's the technical meeting, and it goes back and forth that way. So I got to do that. I got to teach a class on how we run our businesses in America, because we have a free market and we're full capitalists. Well, over in Europe, a lot of them are governed through the government. The government says what territory you can work in. The government has, control over your pricing, has control over your, even your workers, how much you have to pay them, what you have to provide for them. It's a whole different game. And so they're scared when the government pulls back and says, hey, we're not going to provide that territory for you anymore. It's not protected by us anymore. We're not going to protect the pricing. That's scary for them. For us, for me, that's perfect. I don't want the government involved at all in that kind of stuff. I want the free market to work, and the best companies win, and they can charge, accordingly. So that was fun to teach them. Some of the things that we were teaching, it would apply. Some things wouldn't apply. But it was a fantastic opportunity to do that. Then we had a few days off. We got to visit Copenhagen, Denmark, and some Sweden, some more, and then go over to a really cool thing called Spazzacamini. And it's in northern Italy, and the Santa Maria, the town called Santa Maria Maggiore. And it's a town that's normally like 5,000 people. And for this festival, 1,500 to 2,000 chimney sweeps from around the world converge on it. And they said about 30,000 people were there in this town to watch the chimney sweeps. We have a party for a couple of days, and then we have a parade through the middle of this town. And to say it's unreal doesn't do it any justice. It's one of the neatest things I've ever been. It makes you so proud to be part of a trade. I don't think any other trade does this. If you are in the chimney trade, or you're in any trade, you want to see something that's real, something that's totally blue collar. In fact, a lot of the chimney sweeps have soot on their hands, and they go through and they They put soot all over the whole crowd. The whole crowd is sooted up and black dirt face all over them, and they love it. It's one of the most amazing things you could ever do. So I was fortunate enough it's my 5th time going over there and getting to enjoy that. So that was super fun. Again, sorry for the delay in the podcast. I hope you found other things to listen to, and I'm going to try to be back on track. Quick update on my father. Another kind of bad thing. My father's still suffering from Alzheimer's, and it's getting worse, as it always does. And his health is very poor. And, we're moving him from one hospital thing to a full-time nursing home, and just mess. I wish this on no one. It's one of the hardest things I've ever had to deal with. So thank you for the people who have, wished me well and said, nice things. So I'm going to finish up the podcast on this podcast on leadership. I hope I have enough time to go through. If not, I'll have a third. I had, part 1 a couple weeks ago, and I've made some notes for part 2. But I also wanted to start off too with a nice letter I got from a friend of mine, Taylor. And he said, "Mark, thank you for everything you have done for me and my company. I so appreciate your mentorship and always being honest. It means more to me than you know. Your friendship and your opinion matters. I wanted you to know that when you speak, I listen. Love you, man." Taylor. Super nice. Thank you so much. That means a lot. Again, in business, and if you can tell people the hard stuff sometimes when you see it happening in business, I've found that it's sometimes it's ugly, sometimes it's not good. I kind of got mad at the airport this last week when I was traveling. They checked my passport 5 times within about 100 feet. And it was unbelievably unnecessary. And of course, me being me, I had to say, you realize that person 20 steps ago just checked my passport, and about 50 steps before that, another guy standing there at this area checked our passports. You don't need to be checking our passports. This is ridiculous. Of course, I had that podcast, Dumb is Real, and that just when I hear that, I can't not see it. But anyway, these are first world problems. I got to travel over to Europe, travel to some of the best countries on earth, got to do fun stuff. I'm not complaining. So to finish up, to do more on our part 2 of our leadership, I don't believe I talked about domineering leaders. Domineering leaders, everybody kind of knows this kind of domineering. It's their way or the highway. They create very compliant followers. You've got to just do it their way, and a lot of times they can have good results because they are very domineering. The problem is when you're too domineering, you also have weak teams because they're all dependent on you as the domineering. They don't want to make you mad. They don't want to upset you. They don't know that if you're gonna come down on them or fire them, they're kind of scared. You develop a lot of yes people. You get a lot of yes men around you and yes women, because if they're not yes people, you get rid of them, or the domineering person gets rid of them. I shouldn't say you get rid of them, but they create yes teams, which is one of the worst things you can have. You want a team that can be honest. They can tell you the truth. They can tell you the hard truth. They will, come at you and challenge you, not in a bad way, but in a good way. I want to be challenged. If I'm all going off the rails, I need somebody to say, this, I don't think it's going to work, and here's why. Now, I may still say, no, we're going to do it this way, but so many times they have helped me not make a big mistake. And sometimes I wish some people would have stepped in when I was getting ready to make a big mistake, and I did. And then they go, oh yeah, I could have seen that. I'm like, oh, thanks. It doesn't help me at all. A couple years ago, there was a Story Musgrave. He actually wrote some kind words in my Blue Collar Gold book. He was the astronaut that flew up and fixed the Hubble Space Telescope. If you remember, a long time ago when it was out of focus, they had to basically put glasses on it so it could see. Well, Story Musgrave was the guy who did that. If you want to see a life of a leader Go to LinkedIn, type in Story Musgrave, and look at his work history. No matter who you are, you're going to feel like you haven't done anything in life. You're going to feel lazy. This man, it's unbelievable what he's accomplished. I mean, a neurosurgeon, an astronaut. He's a fellow at Disney. He's got all these degrees. He was a tank commander, just a fighter pilot. It's unbelievable. Go to LinkedIn, type in Story Musgrave, and look what that guy has done. Very humbling. Well, it was super humbling for him to write some nice words he said he was all about blue collar. You know, he grew up as a farm kid, he said, and those hands that he showed in his speech were the ones who fixed the Hubble Space Telescope. And I think one day I'm going to tell that whole story that he told us at our convention. But he was saying as a leader that he always wants everybody to say everything. If he was on the operating table and he was getting ready to operate on somebody, he wants everybody from the nurse to his assistant to talk. And if you see anything, say it. Don't keep silent. Don't say what if. You talk. We'll make determinations. But domineering leaders don't want to hear from everybody. They think it's a challenge. So the other thing about domineering leaders is it can create, the bigger you get, the scarier the leader is. The more power he has, the scarier that person walking in the room is, or coming to talk to you, or asking you to come in the office. You kind of get scared. So again, are you that kind of leader? You're going to create a much weaker team if you're domineering. I think one of the ways to not be domineering is to ask more questions. If you feel like you might be domineering, you know, I've heard a ratio 10 ask 10 questions to one direction. A lot of times domineering leaders give a lot of direction and they ask very few questions. Ask more questions. It's flattering. You learn a lot, and you won't be as domineering. So the other one, I don't know if I talked about it last week, and if I did, forgive me, was secretive leaders. A secretive leader, and I've worked for them before, I've been around them, they don't want people to know all the details. They keep everything in silos, which I hate that term, but they keep everybody compartmentalized and separate. They have kind of a term where this is only for the top people. You know, they'll have those kind of things. This is only for this group. You're not part of that group, so you don't need to know. And they kind of, again, they also build very low trust teams. The teams don't trust anybody. They don't believe things. And if you ever want a secretive leader, read the book Bad Blood. It is it's an amazing book. It's about Elizabeth Holmes and that Theranos blood scandal where they made that machine that was supposed to test do 1,000 blood tests on a drop of blood. It went in Walgreens. She was the youngest billionaire woman ever. Amazing scam job. And it was all BS. And they wrote a best-selling book on it. I think there was going to be a movie coming out with Jennifer Lawrence, but I don't know that it ever came out. All kinds of podcasts on it. I think the podcast is called The Dropout. Man, that's a secretive leader to the hilt. And they kept everybody in the blind. And as soon as you figured something out, you were gone. Huge disaster. I think she's facing prison time at this point. That's the epitome of a secretive leader. A couple more things on leaders that I wrote down. The worst leader. And the worst leader, in my opinion, and this was what I was before, was the passive leader. I mean, kill me. The passive leader is the worst. The passive leader frustrates everybody. Everybody is frustrated with the passive leader. And if there's one leadership style that I consult on a lot, that the people that come into my Blue Collar University when I talk to them, they're the passive leader. They're the good guy. They're the nice guy. They're too nice. They get run over. And everybody that loves the passive leader and cares about the passive leader also can't stand what's happening to the passive leader. They hate that the passive leader is getting run over. And if the passive leader won't stand up for themselves, why should they stand up for them? So the passive leader gets very disengaged followers. Like, the followers will follow for a while and then they're like, what for? He doesn't care. She doesn't care. I can't get a straight answer from them. They say they're going to do stuff and they don't. They don't hold people accountable, especially the good people that need you to hold them accountable. I've said it a bunch where I was that kind of a leader. I remember my CFO came to me one time and goes, Mark, you're too nice. You're too nice. You're a nice guy. You're too nice. And I said, and I've said this before, if I have to be an asshole to run this business, I don't want to run it. I don't want to have to be hard to run this business. He goes, well, you don't have to do that, but they just know that you won't take any crap. They can't give you any crap. You have to be that guy. So I've worked on being that guy. I've worked on not taking crap. And I'm telling you, if you could do anything, it's be that guy. Not be mean-spirited, but just have very clear lines. And when somebody passes through it, there's a bomb on the other end. There's a consequence on the other end. And it's clear. It doesn't have to be personal. It doesn't have to be emotional. It's just the consequence of not doing what you're supposed to do, or being, mean to people, or whatever your line is. Just don't take it. I always thought that if I cared enough for people and did the right thing by them, they would get better. They would stop doing drugs. They would start being nice. They would do all the things that I thought people should do if somebody cared about you and paid you, gave you money and paid you well to do it. I was super wrong about that. It doesn't work that way. You hold them accountable, and either they do it or they don't, and you move on. You get other people that are accountable, and you build a team of accountability, and you build a team that trusts each other. If you have a bunch of weak links in there, the team doesn't know if this rope is going to break at any point. They don't know if they can depend on people. Do not be a passive leader. I think I have some more notes. They don't address the issues. Here's the other thing. They hope things get better. They hope it just don't do anything and things will get better. Doesn't work that way. You have to buffalo up. You have to go right at the problem, and you have to fix it. That's how stuff happens. You have to say it out loud. You have to say, this is the problem, and we've got to fix it. Here it is. You're the problem. You're doing this. And then your other people who are already doing the right thing, they're like, yeah, he's got my back. He's not going to let that happen to me. I'm telling you, this was me a million times over. I thought I was a bad guy if I had to address something, if I had to go at somebody. It's just, I've said this before, great book for that. If you're this guy, the other one is No More Mr. Nice Guy. I've said it before on a podcast, and I can't think of the author, but that book helped me understand that it's not that you have to be a jerk. Also, the book of The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F by Mark Manson talks a lot about that. It's to care enough to do something about it. So, the main thing to get over being a passive leader is to do something. Do something and jump in there and make it happen. So those are the main leadership styles, and that there are. There's mixtures of others, and there's different names for all kinds of things. Everybody's a mixture of all these. No one's perfect. No one leadership style is perfect. But let me back up. There's one more. The one other leadership style, the best leadership style, and I almost skipped over it, is the empowered leader. The leader that empowers others, basically, is what I'm saying. A leader like that gives the power away, and he builds people up, or she builds people up. They go around finding how to build better leaders. I talked about this also before, was where your business changes the day that you decide that part of your job, if you're the CFO or you're the president or you're the person in charge, the day you decide your job is to find smarter people than you take some of your time and find smarter people than you to run the business, your whole business changes. I've now got several high-level people that help me run this business, and we are going so much faster than we did with me running it at such a better level and less shaky. Now, was it hard bringing high-level people in? Yeah, because they got to fix stuff. That's hard. But man, you can run so much faster and better. So again, the empowered leader builds teams. The empowered leader builds leaders. Do you have leaders that you trust and you hand off big chunks of your business to? I listened to a podcast by Craig Groeschel, and a lot of this stuff comes from some of his podcasts. It's the leadership podcast, Craig Groeschel, and that's all his podcast is. He's a church leader, and he's really got a lot of good ideas about leadership. So I highly recommend, if you're looking for podcasts on leadership, pick his up. But basically, on the leadership part of it, the empowered leader, he says, how far down can your organization say yes? Okay, so if there's a problem, how far down the chain can that person fix the problem? You've heard these stories about Ritz-Carlton where, they've got amazing customer service and, they're out of a certain flavor of ice cream and, the waiter runs to the store and gets this flavor of ice cream or does something extraordinary because he can fix the problem. That's empowered people. How far down, how big of a problem, let's say it's $100 problem in your business. Can your technician or can your frontline customer service person make it right? Is it a $500 problem? Can they fix a $1,000 problem? When does it have to come to you, and how far down can those decisions be made? If somebody breaks something on somebody's property, do they have the ability to fix it right then and buy whatever or hire a company to come in and fix the yard? I mean, what level can they say down? Can they say yes? And that tells you how empowering your business is. I know for me, we go down to probably the manager, the level manager, and then the technician can make a ton of decisions. Now, for me, the apprentice can't make a lot of decisions on fixing anything. I mean, if he does something immediately that he could fix, but in general, it kind of goes there. And then in my office, almost all the girls have the ability to fix any problem, but then it does go up to that first level manager, and she's my general manager, and she can fix almost every problem without me needing to be involved. So as a business owner, you're going to like that. You're going to like people fixing problems. If they fix them wrong, it's not going to crash the company. And you go back and say, yeah, I wouldn't have done it that way. Here's how I think about it. A long time ago, it was very flattering. And I'm not bragging, but for a while, when I was really trying to hand off big chunks of the business, everybody started to say WWMD. What would Mark do? And they would bet on, Mark would say this, Mark would do that. I bet Mark would give that customer the full refund. I bet Mark would say, no, too bad, you're going to pay, or whatever the problem was. It was WWMD. And that became one of our kind of core values. They voted on it. They wanted to do it. They wanted to try to think the way I did. And it couldn't have been more flattering. If you can get your company to think or try to think like you, I mean, that's duplication, and that is the key to running a bigger business, is for them to think like you do. The other side of it is for them to think better than you and faster than you and maybe improve your thinking. And that started happening in my business too, where I have people who think differently and I'm like, oh, that's a better idea than I had. And that's where it really gets exciting. So the highest level, is the empowered leader. Strive for this. Strive for helping your people be empowered. That they're going to stick with you longer. They're going to be more involved. Your business is going to run faster and better if you do that. So a couple other leadership ideas was the more they know, the more they care. In leadership, again, an empowered leader will share the information freely. They will give all the numbers they can. They don't hide finances. They don't hide tactics. They don't hide hiring. I know some companies would even hide pricing information and how pricing was, because they didn't want the technician or the person to leave and have all the keys to the castle. Well, they're going to guess anyway. They're going to try to guess how much profit you're making. They're going to guess how much stuff costs. They're going to look it up. They're going to say, it cost you $100 for this part and you charge $1,000. Wow, you made $900. And, they don't realize all the expense in business, but in their mind. But so be as transparent as you can. Again, the more they know, the more they care. A couple other things. Again, Craig Groeschel says this all the time. People would always rather follow a leader that is real rather than one that's, people would rather follow a leader that's always real rather than one that's always right. I think that's so strong. He says that on his podcast, and I love that. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to totally be wrong. Be real about it, own it, fix it, follow the sword, own it, pay for it, get over it, get through it. Let your people be the same way. Like, I can tell you, my people aren't afraid to make mistakes. They're not afraid to make mistakes, and they're cut and they're out the door, although we're really good at hiring and we can replace you pretty quickly. It's not a threat, but they're not afraid to make mistakes. I don't ever fire somebody on making mistakes. That's not why you ever get fired from me. Mistakes happen. Now, if you make a lot of them, I might have to demote you. I might have to pull you back a notch or a level, back down to apprentice or out of a management position, but you're not getting fired over mistakes. You're getting fired over policy breaches or other things, respect or fighting or drug issues, things that aren't not mistake driven. I don't really care about mistakes that much. I mean, I don't want to make them, and I want to make, my systems as good as I can, but mistakes are they have to happen. I make them, everybody makes them. So that's I think that's almost my time. Like, I'm about 27 minutes. That's about my time on this podcast. Leadership has been the hardest thing for me. I've mentioned it before. My brother, to me, was more of a natural leader. He was in the military. He always had a lot of people around him. He as a kid, everybody wanted to follow him, figure out what he was doing. I wasn't that guy. I was everybody's friend. I played music. I was a drummer. I was in the back. I wasn't a leader. And as I started to have to become a leader, I started to learn those kind of rules. There's absolutely rules to leadership. A couple books you should read. The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership from John Maxwell is a fantastic book. Leaders Eat Last is a great book. And Extreme Ownership is a great book too. That is from two military Navy SEAL guys who really, they take ownership of everything in their leadership. And even the worst situations over in Iraq and Afghanistan, and how to own it all the way through as a leader. And it helps you become more respected. The bottom line is, if no one's following you right now, you probably don't have great leadership skills. If you got 1 or 2 employees or no employees, you're probably not a leader. If you don't have a big following on the internet, if when you say something, a lot of people don't like it or share it or tweet it out, you're probably not a leader or a thought leader. That's okay. But the better at leadership you get, the more success you can have. The more, when you say something, it matters, the more you can make, change in your life. You can attract, success has a great magnetism. So work on your leadership. The better leader you are, the more options you have. All right, guys, that's my time. I'll talk to you soon.